Well, peace, friends. My name's Tom. I'm the pastor here at Sycamore Creek, and I'm so glad that you have joined us tonight for this partnership that we are doing this year with Hope Central Urban Arts to perform a dramatic reading, a dramatic presentation of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail. I've talked to several people over the 3 years that we've done this, and they read it in high school or college, and it had an impact on them. I didn't read it until seminary. In seminary, I took a Martin Luther King preaching class, and that was the first time that I really engaged this letter, and it's pretty much been kicking my butt ever since. When I became pastor of Sycamore Creek, as we got more and more involved in anti-racism work, I thought that my church needed to sit underneath this letter each year. And so for the last 3 years, we have done partnered with some group to do a production or a staged reading of this letter. And this year, to change it up and be a little creative, we said, let's do it with children and youth, and AnnaMaria Horn and Hope Central Urban Arts was up for the challenge, and you are about to just get an amazing production. These kids, these teenagers have worked so hard for what you're about to experience tonight. Now, you're going to see Martin Luther here in jail, and he is responding to an open letter from some white clergy about what he and his group are doing in Birmingham, Alabama. The show tonight is free, but if you would like to contribute to Hope Central Urban Arts, you'll see blue buckets around the room, the studio. You can throw some cash in there, and that will help continue to keep arts available to schools and students when those kind of budgets are being cut these days. Without anything else to say, here is Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail.
The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? I will wait on you. I will wait. Trust in you. The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? I will wait on you. I will wait on you. I will trust in you. I will trust in you. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. The Lord not be afraid. I will wait on you. I will wait on you. I will trust in you. I will trust in you. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. I will remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord. We set our hope on you. We set our hope on your love. We set our hope on the one who is the everlasting God. You are the everlasting God. You are the everlasting. We set our hope on you. We set our hope on your love. We set our hope on the one who is the everlasting God. You are the everlasting God. You are the everlasting. We set our hope on you. We set our hope on your love. We set our hope on the one who is the everlasting God. You are the everlasting God. You are the everlasting. We set our hope on you. We set our hope on your love. We set our hope on the one who is the everlasting God. You are the everlasting God. You are the everlasting.
The clapping and singing is nice and all, but if you want me to stay awake, you better get to explaining.
Well, I think that what Pastor attended was having Martin lead his letter today.
August 1963. While locked here in Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement called Our Present Activities, Unwise and Untimely. Seldom, if ever, do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. But since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and your criticisms are sincere, I would like to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms.
What reason does he give for being in Birmingham at all? We don't need outsiders coming in.
I have the honor of serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization operating in every southern state. Several months ago, our local office here in Birmingham invited us to be on a call to engage in a nonviolent protest if it was necessary. We agreed, and when the hour came, we lived up to our promises. So, I am here along with several members of my staff because we were invited here. Beyond this, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the 8th century prophets left their little villages and carried their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond their hometowns, and just as the Apostle Paul left his little village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to practically every neighborhood and city of the Greco-Roman world, I too am compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my neighborhood. Like Paul, I must continuously respond to the Macedonia call for aid.
Master who?
Shh, be quiet, we're in church.
This choir song is good, but if you want me to stay awake, you better explain what he's talking about.
Okay, Macedonia is a country in our system is the state, just like America is the country and Alabama is the state, where Martin's in jail in.
Martin who?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
You get to call him by his first name?
No, but I'm talking to you.
Well, put some respect into it.
Okay, Dr. King, that's him writing his letter to God, just like him told Paul to help the Christians in Alabama understand why it's so important to work together to spread the good news. So be quiet and listen.
Moreover, I am aware of the connection between all communities and states. I cannot sit by in Atlanta without being concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are all caught in a net, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all. We should not accuse the people who come into town to help or being troublemakers or outsiders. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider.
But we hate these protests that are taking place in Birmingham.
I am sorry that you didn't care to mention the conditions that made the demonstrations necessary. It is unfortunate that so-called demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham. But it is even more unfortunate that the white leaders of this city left the Negro community with no alternative.
Demonstrations. What's going on?
Protest.
And hearing him say Negro, doesn't that make you uncomfortable?
Not really. Negro is what they said back then. And since I'm not black and you're not white, I prefer African American. And actually, you're European American.
Wait, what? Oh, I get it. We're both American because we were born here. But our ancestors, you're African and mine European. Makes sense to me.
Dr. King is saying that African Americans of his time are having to respond with protests. What's going on?
Oh, I only see on Instagram.
Right, something has to be done.
In any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps. What's the first step?
Collection of the facts to see if injustices are alive.
Yes, and the second step?
Negotiation.
Yes, and the third basic step in any nonviolent campaign.
Education on the idea of nonviolence.
Right, and number 4?
Direct action.
We have gone through all of these steps in Birmingham. There could be no benefit in admitting the fact that racial injustice is all over this community. Birmingham is probably the most segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of police brutality is known in every section of this country. Its unjust treatment of Negroes in the courts is a notorious reality. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than in any other in this nation. These are hard, brutal, and unbelievable facts. On the basis of them, Negro leaders sought to negotiate with the political leaders, but they constantly refused to engage in good faith negotiation. Then came the opportunity last September to talk with some of the leaders of the business community. In these negotiating sessions, certain promises were made by the store owners, such as their promise to remove humiliating racial signs from the stores. On the basis of these promises, we agreed to stop any type of protest. As the weeks and months went on, we realized we were victims of a broken promise. The sign stayed up. Yet again, we are confronted with the blasted hopes and the dark shadow of a deep disappointment settled on us. So we have no other option except to prepare for direct action. We show up to the protest to bring attention to our struggle before the local and national community. We know the difficulties involved, so we decided to go through a process of education on how to protest with violence. At these workshops on violence, we repeatedly asked the question, are you able to accept blows without fighting back?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Shh.
Are you ready to go to jail for this?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely not.
For real, for real.
Boy, bye.
Isn't negotiation a better path?
You are exactly right to call negotiation of protest. Confront the issue. Nonviolent protest seeks to create a crisis in tension so that a community is forced for it. This may sound shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have worked and preached against violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. We must see the need of having nonviolent, good trouble create the kind of tension in society that will help people to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood.
So the purpose of these protests is to create a situation so Christ is packed that it will open the door to negotiation. We agree to call for negotiation. One of the basic points in their statement is that protests aren't necessary. My friends, I say to you, we have not made a single gain in civil rights history without determined nonviolent pressure. History is the long and tragic story of the fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges early. We know through painful experience that freedom is never freely given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Honestly, I have never engaged in a protest that was convenient for those who had not had to suffer from the disease of segregation.
I like him.
Me too.
4 years now, I heard the word wait. It rang in the ear with a piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. It has relieved emotional only to cause more. We must come to see that justice delayed is justice denied. We have waited for more than 340 years for our God-given and constitutional rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward the goal of political independence, and we still creep at horse and buggy pace just to have a cup of coffee at a lunch counter.
I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging parts of segregation and say, wait. When you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your black brothers and sisters with impunity. When you have seen the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. When you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter cannot go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on the television. And tears welling up in her little eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children and see the depressing clouds of inferiority beginning to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing bitterness towards white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son asking an agonizing pathos, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored. When your first name becomes nigger and your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and when your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by night,
Yes, Queen.
Stands never know what to expect next, and plagued with an inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer plunged into an abyss of injustice where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair.
I hope, sirs, you can understand our unavoidable impatience.
I agree. I have a great deal of anxiety over their willingness to break laws.
This is certainly a legitimate concern. Since we urge people to obey the Supreme Court's decision of 1954 outlawing the segregation in the public schools, I find it rather strange and conflicting we choose to break these laws.
How can they advocate breaking some laws and obeying others?
The answer is found in the fact that there are two types of laws. There are just laws and there are unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. Now, what is the difference between the two? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is against the law of God. Any law that uplifts human dignity is just. Any law that degrades human dignity is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the human dignity. Segregation is not only politically, economically, and sociologically inappropriate, but is morally wrong and sinful. Who can say that the officials of Alabama who set up the segregation laws were fairly elected? Throughout the state of Alabama, all types of sneaky methods are used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. And there are some counties without a single Negro registered to vote, despite the fact that Negroes make up most of the population. Can any law set up like this be considered fair? These are just a few examples of unjust laws and just laws.
I don't know if I ever get to use hearing that.
Hearing what?
Negro.
There are some instances when a law is just on its face and unjust where it counts. For instance, I was arrested Friday on a charge of parading without a permit. Now, there is nothing wrong with a law that says you need a permit for a parade. But when the law is used to support segregation and to deny citizens their First Amendment right for peaceful assembly and peaceful protest, then it becomes unjust. Of course, there is nothing new about this kind of civil disobedience. It was seen in the refusal of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to obey the laws of Nebuchadnezzar, because God's law was involved. It was practiced by the early Christians who were willing to face hungry lions and the threat of chopping block before giving in to the laws of the Roman Empire.
Forget that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal, and everything that the Hungarian freedom fighters did in Hungary was illegal. It was illegal to help and comfort a Jew in Hitler's Germany, but I'm sure that if I had lived there in Germany during that time, I would have helped and comforted my Jewish brothers even though it was illegal.
First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been deeply disappointed with the white Christian. I have almost reached the sad conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the work towards freedom is the white observer, who is more focused on order than on justice, who denies a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with your goal, but I can't agree with your methods of protest, who tries to impose the timetable for another man's freedom, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more confusing than outright rejection.
But your actions, even though peaceful, must be condemned because they encourage violence.
But can you really say that? Isn't this like blaming the robbed man because having money means that you should be robbed? Isn't this like blaming Jesus for his crucifixion because he was the loving Son of God? Federal courts have pointed out that it is wrong to tell someone not to pursue his basic constitutional rights because it would lead to violence. Society must protect the robbed and punish the robber.
I had also hoped that the white Christian would stop getting in the way. I received a letter this morning from a white brother in Texas.
All Christians know that the colored people will receive equal rights eventually, but is it possible that you are too great of a religious hurry? It has taken Christianity almost 2,000 years to accomplish what it has. The teachings of Christ take time to come to earth.
Is this man crazy? I think he's crazy. He wants to wait 2,000 years.
If you work with God instead of against him, it could be done right now.
Mm-hmm.
All that is said, here grows out of tragic misuse of time. It is a silly idea that giving it more time will fix this situation. Actually, time is neutral. It can be used either to build up or to tear down. We will have to repent in this generation, not only for the hurtful words and actions of the bad people, but for the gross silence of the good people. We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on wheels of chance. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of people willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time becomes a partner of the force of social stagnation.
But King's activity in Birmingham has been so extreme.
Extreme? Extreme? Dr. King is literally standing there, his mouth shut, hands tied behind his back, doing nothing.
So just being there is extreme. It sounds like the preacher man has a problem with the king even existing.
At first, I was rather disappointed that fellow pastors would see my nonviolent efforts as those of extremists. I started thinking about the fact that I stand in the middle of two opposing forces in the Negro community. I have tried to stand between these two forces, saying that we need not to follow the do-nothingism or of the complacent or the hatred and despair of the black nationalists. There is a more excellent way of love and nonviolent protest. I am grateful to God that through the Negro Church, the way of nonviolence entered our struggle. Decision had not been made. I'm convinced that by now, many streets of the South would be flowing with floods of blood. And I am further convinced that if our white brothers treat us like troublemakers and refuse to support our nonviolent efforts, millions of Negroes, out of frustration and despair, will turn to black nationalist ideas, a development that will lead to a racial nightmare. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The need for freedom will eventually come. This is what has happened to the American Negro. Something within has reminded us of our birthright of freedom. Something without has reminded us that we can gain it. We are moving with a sense of urgency toward the promised land of racial justice. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and frustrations.
That's right.
He has to get them out. So let him march sometime. Let him have his prayer marches to the city hall. Understand why he must have sit-ins and freedom rides. If his repressed emotions do not come out in these nonviolent ways, they will come out in expressions of violence. This is not a threat. It is a fact of history.
Come on, Pastor.
So I have not said to my people, get rid of your frustration. But I have tried to say that this normal and healthy frustration can be channeled through the creative outlet of nonviolent protest. I had hoped that the white Christian would understand this. Maybe I was too optimistic. Maybe I expected...
Wow, Dr. King is not playing right now.
It's the truth. What he's saying makes sense.
And he's so bold with it, too. I mean, whether they want to hear it or not, he's going to be saying it,
Well,
if they like it or not.
Well, it needs to be said.
I am thankful, however, that some of the white brothers have grasped the meaning of social revolution and committed themselves to it. They are all still small in number, but big in quality. Some, like Ralph McGill, Lillian Smith, Harry Golden, and James Dabbs, have written about our struggle in equivalent, prophetic, and understanding terms. Others have marched with us down nameless streets of the South. They sat in with us at lunch counters and rode in with us on the freedom rides. with us in filthy roach-infested jails, suffering the abuse of brutal and angry policemen who see them as dirty Negro lovers.
My Lord, help
I
us
had
God.
the
Help us
strange
God.
feeling when I was placed in the leadership of the bus protest in Montgomery several years ago that we would have the support of the white church. I felt that the white ministers, priests, and rabbis of the South would be some of our strongest allies. Instead, some have been outright opponents, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous. I have remained silent behind the security of stained glass windows. In spite of my shattering dreams of the past, I came to Birmingham with the hope that the white religious leader of the community would see the justice of our cause and with deep moral concern serve as the channel through which the just concerns could get to the people in power. I had hoped that each of you would understand. But again, I have been disappointed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In the midst of blatant injustice, I have heard so many ministers say those are real social issues which the gospel has nothing to do with.
There was a time when the church was very powerful. It was during that period that the early Christians rejoiced when they were deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was the thermostat that changed the rules of society. Wherever the early Christians entered a town, the people in power got disturbed and rushed to convict them for being troublemakers. But they accepted that they had to obey God rather than man. They were small in number, but big in commitment. They were too God-intoxicated to be intimidated. Things are different now. The modern church is so often a weak voice with an uncertain sound. It is so often the main supporter of the way things are. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If the church of today does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will cancel its realness, lose the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. I meet young people every day whose disappointment with the church has risen to outright disgust. I hope the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this important hour. But even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, we will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over this nation. Because the goal of America is freedom, abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America.
Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson scratched across the pages of history the majestic word of the Declaration of Independence, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our foreparents labored here without wages. They made cotton king, and they built the homes of their masters in the midst of brutal injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet, out of the bottomless vitality, our people continue to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands.
I must close now, but before closing, I am led to bring up one other point in your statement that troubled me.
The Birmingham police are to be warmly commended for keeping order and preventing violence.
You would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its angry, violent dogs, literally biting 6 unarmed, non-violent Negroes. I don't believe you would have so quickly commended the policemen if you would observe their ugly, inhumane treatment of Negro in the here in the city jail. if you would watch them push and curse old Negro women and young Negro girls, if you would see them slap and kick old Negro men and young Negro boys, if you would observe them, as they did on 2 occasions, refusing to give us food because we wanted to sing our grace together. I am sorry that I cannot join you in your praise for the police department.
It is true. They have been organized in their public handling of the protesters. In this sense, they have been publicly nonviolent. But for what purpose? To preserve the evil system of segregation. So I have tried to make it clear that it is wrong to use immoral means to gain moral ends. But now I must affirm that it is just as wrong, or even more, to use moral means to preserve immoral ends. I wish you had commended the Negro protesters of Birmingham for their shining courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of the most inhuman bullying.
They will be the James Merediths, courageously and with a majestic sense of purpose, facing the jeering and hostile mobs and the agonizing loneliness that characterizes the life of the pioneer. They will be old, oppressed, battered Negro women, civilized and a 72-year-old woman of Montgomery, Alabama, who rose up with a sense of dignity and with her people decided not to ride the segregated buses, and responded to one who inquired about her tiredness with ungrammatical profundity. My feet is tired, but my soul is rested. They will be young high school and college students, young ministers of the gospel, and a host of their elders courageously and nonviolently sitting in at lunch counters and willingly going to willingly going to jail for conscience sake. One day the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for the best in the American dream and the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage.
Never before have I written a letter this long, or should I say a book. I'm afraid that it is much too long to take your precious time.
I mean, I like him, but it was a bit long.
He's a preacher. What did you expect?
I can assure you that it would have been much shorter if I had been writing from a comfortable desk. But what else is there to do when you are alone for days in the boredom of a narrow jail cell, other than write long letters, think strange thoughts, and pray long prayers? If I have downplayed the seriousness of this issue or seemed too impatient, please forgive me. If I have exaggerated or am tempted to settle for anything less than full brotherhood, only God can forgive me. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood, Martin Luther King, Jr.
Question for everyone listening. Do you still believe that we're the future and we have a chance? Moment, an opportunity to plant the seed and water it. To watch it go, you'll see. Do it for me. Do what you can. Talk about it while you have a chance. Is it for love? Do it for peace. Do it for the children, for our destiny. Do it for me. With your help, with With your help, we can get what we need. With your help, we can have a space, a place for us to be great, that we can call our own. Call our own. Do it for me. Do what you can. Do more than think or talk about it while you have a chance. Do it for love. Do it for peace. Do it for the children, for our destiny. Do it for me. Do it for God. Do more than think or talk about it while you have a chance. Do it for love. Do it for peace. Do it for the children, for our destiny. Do it for love. Do it for peace. Do it for the children, for our destiny. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to be best that I can ever be. Do it for me. Do it for me.
Putting it up.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all for coming tonight in supporting arts in the community. Thank you for supporting our kids. Did you enjoy them tonight? Yes. I am super excited and super stoked. So this is a letter from Birmingham Jail. As significant as it was in 1968, it is still relevant today. And I know because of the conversations that I've had with these very kids who are on stage. This is an important message for them, and they are living it and walking it out daily. So thank you for supporting them. And thank you all for supporting Dr. King's dream. And now we encourage you to do the same thing. And we know that the one way to make this happen is by love. And God is love. And our prayer is that God would love through you so that we can see the change that needs to happen in our community. Amen? Amen.
We want to take just a moment here before we leave tonight to thank you, AnnaMaria. And we also want to bring somebody. I want to bring somebody out of the shadows here. Miss Erin, if you'll please join us up here on the stage.
Thank you very much.
Erin took the script and adapted it for this cast here tonight, including their translators over on the pew, and thinking about how to take MLK's words and make it applicable for this age group. Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, AnnaMaria, for the way that you invest in our children. Friends, thank you for joining us tonight. Peace.
So I'll invite the cast to go out into the howdy line where you all can go out and greet them. You can fist bump, air hug, or high five to congratulate them on their work tonight.